graphics, etc. So this is really the big buckets how we're looking at political advertising. Like I said, we believe that transparency brings in more responsibility. It also brings in more accountability. And we're certainly holding ourselves to a higher standard. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much for adhering to the time. I'm grateful to you, and the Facebook and social media have started playing a very important role in our elections. We have never taken this into account of the expenditure limits and so on, but I hope some regulations will take place soon. And there is no doubt that it plays a very important, both constructive and destructive role. Hopefully, some other changes will be brought about to ensure that we usher in a cleaner democracy. May I request Mr. Milan Vasudev?
Sure. Thank you. Let me just start by thanking the organizers. This is my first time at the Indian School of Business. It's a real pleasure to be here. What I thought I might do in my limited time is reflect on some of the findings of a book that, in fact, several people in this room contributed to, called The Costs of Democracy, Political Finance in India. It came out in 2018. And that book tried to answer 5 questions. 1, what are the sources of campaign finance in India? Number 2, what do people, candidates, parties actually spend on? 3, how does this vary at different levels of government, given that we have a federal system with elections at the national, state, and local levels? 4, what's the regulatory environment in which this spending takes place? And 5, how can we reform the system to make it a little bit better? I'm going to focus just on the theme of this panel, which is campaign expenditure. And here I want to shamelessly sort of appropriate some of the findings of one of the collaborators, contributors to this book, a political scientist named Simone Chaussard, who teaches at the University of Leiden in Amsterdam. And what Simone's work and some of my own work and some of the others in this room shows, I think challenges a little bit something that was mentioned in the opening video that we all saw. This idea that you have tons and tons of black money in the system, and that the vast majority of election-related expenditure is on so-called vote buying. I think it's fair to say that yes, the vast majority of the money is probably from black sources, but I don't know that we can say with a great deal of confidence that the vast majority of expenditure is on vote buying. So I want to challenge that conventional wisdom a little bit. And in fact, some of the latest research shows is that while the sources of expenditure may be illegal, a lot of money is actually spent on legal activities or activities that are maybe illegal but not necessarily illegitimate or normatively problematic. They occupy a sort of gray zone. And so campaigns, yes, they are getting more expensive, but that's not only because of this issue of vote buying. But it has a lot to do with the fact that campaigns are becoming more ambitious, more sophisticated, more professional, in an electoral environment that is much more competitive than it used to be. So the sort of punchline, I think, of some of this work is that, equating the rise in the skyrocketing costs of campaigns to purely illegal tactics such as vote buying may be a bit more problematic than we've led people to believe. Now, when you look at the Election Commission's restrictions on what candidates can legally spend money on, there's sort of roughly 5 clusters of activities under the heading of legitimate campaign expenditures. So the first is expenditures on things like meetings, rallies, processions, gatherings. We've all seen these, participated in these, observed them. The second is the cost of campaign materials like flyers and hoardings and other things. Increasingly, we're seeing spend on things like the media, electronic media, social media, and the like. The fourth is on vehicles, on fuels for transport. And then finally on campaign workers and their care and literal care and feeding. And when you actually look on the ground, and here I want to draw on Simone's work, which is from Maharashtra, a lot of expenditure actually is on what we would term sort of politics as usual expenditure, that these are important financial priorities for political candidates in local, state, and in national elections. Two in particular I want to highlight. The first is salaries for political workers. This is what's frequently called, work money, wages for people to come out on the campaign trail and sort of building this army that for 2 or 3 weeks is going to go out and try to reach every part of the constituency. There's an anecdote that Simon gets from an urban constituency in Mumbai where he says, a party worker said, we used to get karyakartas on the promise of tea and samosas, right? That doesn't sort of fly. We're not going to get people out of bed with those kinds of inducements. We actually have to pay. And so I think, these expenditures are not just for the care and feeding of workers, but they also act as, I think, as an important signal to the party apparatus that I'm a credible candidate who is willing to take care of the people who work for me and by extension for the constituency if I'm elected. The second kind of expenditure that we see, and this is where I think it crosses into a gray area, is fees for attending rallies and meetings, or what's often called paid political participation. So you're not only paying for campaign materials, isn't to say that vote buying doesn't take place. It certainly does. I think the terminology of vote buying is a bit problematic. I think a better term for it is gift giving. As we've discussed in the introductory, that great video, it's very hard in the Indian system actually to buy somebody's vote. As we all know, Indian voters are quite shrewd. They'll take money from every political party and then vote for whoever they feel like it on the day. But when it comes to this practice of gift giving, I think there are a few things that complicate the picture. Number one is that there's quite a lot of variation across campaigns in terms of what percentage of campaign budgets are actually spent on this. In Andhra Pradesh, I had the opportunity in 2014 in a constituency in West Godavari to observe MLA campaigns where candidates were spending up to 2/3 of their campaign budget in the last 72 hours on pure gift giving, primarily cash and liquor. Now, that's not necessarily replicated throughout the length and breadth of India in the same way. Simon's work in Maharashtra shows that the percentage is somewhere closer to about 20 to 25%. Jennifer Bissell, who's here somewhere, her work from North India shows that if you interview politicians, they would guess anywhere between 20 to 40%, which is a pretty big range, of voters in their constituency are recipients of some kind of material inducement, right? Cash or liquor or other things. And so even in North India, in the states of Bihar, UP, and Jharkhand, which are the three that you look at, there's quite a lot of variation. And we know just from North and South India, for instance, there's huge differences. So I think vote buying, I think there's going to be a whole separate discussion on this, is an important topic. End with, some reasons why I think expenditure of all types, legitimate and illegitimate, are going up, and these aren't sort of rocket science. I think many people in this room have touched upon them. One is clearly the ballooning size of constituencies, right? And so many politicians say that even if I wanted to send just a simple postcard to every one of my constituents, I would basically blow through my entire campaign budget. The second is, as we're seeing the growth of a rising middle class, we're seeing that more expensive forms of campaign outreach, like media, like social media, like electronic expenditures are increasing. We're seeing a rise in the competitiveness of elections, which puts the burden on parties and candidates to try to one-up everybody else. And I think this leads to a fourth issue, which is that it's increasingly difficult for parties and candidates to kind of calculate the elasticity of the effect of a marginal rupee that they spend in terms of what effect that has. And so I think parties and candidates are sort of locked into an arms race where they're worried that if they don't keep spending, they're going to lose out, but they're not quite sure at what point you hit sort of diminishing returns. So let me just sort of stop there and look forward to the conversation.
Thank you very much. Let me correct, I mentioned it as Milan Vasudeva. I'm sorry, is Milan Vaishnav. So Vasudeva and Vaishnav are probably similar, identical. So thank you very much for your perspective from the point of view of recent elections held in India. And may I now request Mr. Visweshwara Rao. Sorry. I think I'll read for this. He's a former member of parliament, and I'm sure he has got a more practical.
Can I use the podium?
Yeah, sure, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman, co-panelists, and definitely the wonderful organizers here. The subject of money, power, and politics is vast and has great scope for academic research, from vote buying to candidate buying to paid media, family-owned media, to influence of money on policy making and development projects. With campaign expenditures crossing healthcare budgets of nation, I think it's high time that we relook, reevaluate, and find some ways of changing the current system. The session is focused on legitimate campaign expenditure and invites ideas and proposals for an accountable and legitimate political finance model. But before I really start, let me put a few things in perspective. And I think all of us agree on the approximate numbers. About 50,000 to 60,000 crores was spent on in a conservative estimate on the last election. And just about 10% of it is legitimate, be it electoral bonds or other legitimate incomes. So we are talking about 47,000 crores plus, or 90% of the expenditure being illegitimate and black money. So anything that we propose here, any ideas should cover the entire gambit and not just the legitimate. And definitely, India is unique in the sense Parliament's role is unfortunately limited, because Parliament can only pass legislations, and legislations can only cover legitimate expenses. The illegitimate black money expenses are the jobs of the enforcement agencies, whether it's income tax or election commission. So we need to look at the whole gamut. And actually tomorrow there's a session on vote buying. And a lot of mine, I come from the most diverse constituency in India, 4 million population, 2.5 million votes. And the poorest part of India, the wealthiest part of India, including this high-tech city and ISB, falls under this. And the diversity of languages, 5 predominant languages spoken in my constituency, 2 lakh Marathis and things like that. So significant work on this about vote buying, influence on money, elasticity, effectiveness of money, return on investment on money has been done. The research on this Chevilla Parliament constituency has been done by the University of Iowa Bliss School of Applied Politics, and that particular research won an award as well. So we'll talk about vote buying a little later, but before I start, politics is the last resort of scoundrels. And I heard that one too, and I always thought it was well-meaning people giving advice to those venturing into entering politics. But 6 years in politics, I realized it's not the well-meaning people, it's those very scoundrels in politics propagate and spread this idea so that no well-meaning people will ever venture into politics. And the role of money, I feel, after being 6 years in politics, money has a role, but definitely the role of money in politics can be reduced in the Indian context. The same argument about scoundrels in politics also applies to money in politics. They can be honest people in politics, they can be educated people in politics, and the role of money can be limited in India. And also the types of money: soft money, hard money, slush money, corporate money, public money, and of course black money, white money, and more than 50 shades of gray money, but also the electoral bond. So we have wide varieties of money in India that's used in election. And these are technical issues. What is soft money? How do you account for it? Especially on social media. How do I track and account the spend on social media? I have a Twitter account. I spend only $10 a month, but my friend spends $10,000 a month promoting my tweets or retweeting my tweets. So accountability of soft money is very, very difficult. But even further simpler things. This is a cold winter for Hyderabad. I just bought 500 blankets to give to the poor people in my constituency. And I do that every year. Now, am I using my personal wealth to buy that vote of that cold shivering poor person? Or will it be counted? And if it is counted in my election expense, when should it start counting? Should it be 1 month before, 1 year before, 4 years before? I do that every winter. So these are technical issues. But let's go into some more fundamental issues. Is campaign financing good or bad? Should it be limited or should it not be limited? And I think countries abroad went in circles. There is a need to restrict black money, but will reducing campaign expenditure limits reduce black money or increase black money? One theory is it will reduce, but is it acceptable in the Indian current socio-economic situation? Will it be seen politically right? Will a political party be dare enough to propose increase the campaign expenditure so that the actual black money gets reduced? If they do, they'll be seen as pro-rich and they may not get the votes, the popular votes. There are many solutions, and many solutions can be counterintuitive, and all the solutions are very contextual. What worked in India last 60 years may not be working today. What works in one country may not be working today. We have to introspect deeper into the value of money itself more than its monetary value. Money is the fruit of honest human effort. Money is a result of corrupt human practices. Both are money. Money in India is Goddess Lakshmi herself, should be respected and preserved. And for some, money comes and goes, I don't care for money. So in this conflicting ideology, we have to find a solution. Sorry for the philosophy, but let's get into the laws. Recently, the Parliament passed many laws. And of course, as I said earlier, all the reforms and legislations are futile because they affect only 10% of the campaign funding, and 90% Parliament can do nothing with the best of the reforms. So it's a much larger, as many speakers said, is the political party, the people, the society, the civil society, everyone should be involved. But let's look at the legislation itself, because we are talking, this session is limited to legitimate campaign expenditure. So many legislations came in India, I don't want to talk about it, it'll start a political debate, political funding, electoral bonds, NRI proxy voting, all this reform came in the last 5-6 years. But let's see what happened in USA. 2002, I think the Americans reached a point where they thought enough is enough. We need to limit campaign expenditure. It was a popular thought in the American civil society. But strangely, it's also something both the parties agreed. Both the Republicans and both the political parties agreed. And the McCain-Feingold Act, it came in 2002, and it wanted to limit the campaign expenditure. It wanted to limit the soft money, limit the contribution from corporates and individuals funding political campaign. Sounds good, very needed. The bill was passed, but wait a minute. Exactly 8 years later, the US Supreme Court Supreme Court struck down that order, saying that no, campaign expenditure should not be limited, campaign funding should not be limited, and it seems almost counterintuitive. And their logic of the US Supreme Court goes something like this. The First Amendment, the fundamental freedom of expression, limiting freedom of expression goes against the First Amendment, and one can express in multiple ways. You can express your support to a political party through voice. You can express your support to political parties you rightfully earn money. So limiting funding of political campaign funds amounts to curtailing one's freedom of expression. Sounds little convoluted logic, but actually, by this logic, one can justify anything. But the fact is, it is very logical, and the Supreme Court did strike down the McCain-Feingold Act, and actually it was actually called a Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act of 2002, because the whole of America agreed, all the political parties agreed, and they came up with this. What is right in one country may not be right here. It has to be contextual. If a man has 4 wives and a woman has 5 husbands, it is socially, legally, politically, ethically, and morally right in a particular context. So we can't just borrow things from what happened in the United States. Unfortunately, the last few reforms seems to be going the US way, and I don't think we are quite ready. And let me, before I take a minute to propose or support some of the popular notions of limiting campaign finance, let me just speak something about myself. I was a professional who, under unusual circumstances, entered politics. I was a CEO of a Wipro company. I was CEO of a General Electric company. But today I'm standing before you as a criminal, have to be in jail for 7 years for allegedly having picked up a police officer, thrashing him, stripping him of his clothes, and locking him in an office. And newspapers carried reports about 40 crores of mine being caught and 72 crores of mine being caught during the elections. So definitely the system needs to be fixed, especially if we are to attract clean and educated people in politics. Now, what I propose right now is I support state funding of campaign expenditure. Is it practical? Is it suitable? Is it feasible? Is it acceptable? I'm not sure about the acceptability, but I'm sure where it's feasible. State government or the state allocates media time on state-owned and private media of candidate choice, give them equal limited time. Election Commission curated public meetings with or without debates, pamphlets distributed through the state, maybe the Indian postal system, and posters and placards on all Gram Panchayat public offices of equal size for all candidates. And it can go on. The only thing where we need to do research is who is a qualified candidate and who is not a qualified. Because in India, I think the most popular sport is cricket, and the next most popular sport is politics. So once state funds it, there'll be thousands of candidates appearing. So the challenge will be limiting the qualified candidates. And the proverbial, it may not be suitable, the state funding of campaign expenses may not be suitable for some political parties, and especially George Bernard Shaw's proverbial scoundrels in politics. I feel state funding is suitable, and it's time we look at this, and that is my proposition today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I'm lucky to have panelists of this type. They're all observing their time very strictly, and so you will have more time to discuss the issues involved. But the point he mentioned about limiting the campaign expenditure, I have some views. I entirely agree that if you cannot enforce these limits, it's better not to have a law of this type. So we must bring something better to regulate the expenditure. I'll talk about it later. Now, may I request Mr. K. Lakshman our Telangana State President BJP to share his thoughts on the subject. Oh, yeah. Whatever is convenient.
Dignitaries on the dais, esteemed delegates, my media friends, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, I would like to congratulate and compliment Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan Garu for taking this initiation in organizing this money, power in politics. Of course, it is the right time. This deliberation seminars, I learned is going to be a continuous process. Finally, I believe that there is going to be some change after the initiations. Yeah, I think, no problem. Sir, as a person involved in the politics for more than 3.5 decades, I have started my career without any family ground of politicians. Right from assembly level, I have reached up to national level. Many critical responsibilities I have held in the party. After completing my doctorate, coming from student politics from Usmania City, I joined its national party. And I got elected to legislature for 2 terms. In undivided AP, I first got elected in the year 1999. I completed my first tenure. I felt that I have done to the expectations of a common man, as rightly told by Vishwesharao, the constituency which I represent also, which is having a poorer sections to elite in the society, Mashirabad in Hyderabad. That was the Vajpayee's regime. Not less than 3,000 houses have been constructed for the poor, downtrodden sections in the slum areas. A lot of basic amenities have been provided in slums particularly. But when I went for second term elections 2004, people jumped from other parties in the sentiment, regional aspirations, my opponent. Finally, I was so confident that people going to vote for performance and the welfare activities which I have taken up. 2 days before the election, my cadre, my followers started saying, sir, unless until you start distributing liquor house to house in certain slums, it may not be easy for us to come over. Already our opponent, a gigantic personality, switched over from 2 or 3 parties, and now he has come to a regional party. The regional aspirations are there. He's already completed in all the slums by distributing this liquor to house. I said no. At any cost, come whatsoever may, I'm not going to distribute liquor. Finally, the elections are over. I lost just by 200 votes. So Krishnamurti was referring about the Jayaprakash Narayan is the victim. I am the first victim with this money power in politics. Second time, there was a by-election. I contested again in 2008. The party was in power. He has made all the ministers, MLAs in charge, caste-wise, community-wise, dumped all the money, crores of rupees. I just campaigned in a usual manner. I lost second time with 2,000 votes. Almost entire machinery of the government was in that constituency. So a second time I got elected in 2019, 2014. The recent elections we have seen in 2019, people were referring about 50,000 crores to 60,000 crores have been spent throughout India. I have learned from these two Telugu states. That Andhra Pradesh almost it was 10,000 crores in 2019 elections. In Telangana it is more than 6,000 crores. So this money role not only has been increased in election process, even for running the party, conducting meetings, even going for agitations on public issues also, we had to spend money. And unfortunately, even the media, not only during election period, even for normal meetings or normal programs, even on the public issues, if you go for agitation also, we have to spend money. Now, as a president of the party, I know how difficult to run a party at state level. Not only running the party at state level, the expenditure incurred is more than lakhs, even at district level. So I was also president of the party at Hyderabad. I know what was the amount which I have to spend for running the party. So of late, even this additional expenditure incurred, apart from elections, running the party, even on the media, of late, Madam has also emphasized about social media. Even for social media, that young generations more attracted to this digital connections. Earlier we used to move in two-wheelers for meeting our cadre people. Now the digital connection has become a rampant now. We have to spend even on this social media. With all this, earlier in the inaugural sessions also, our Honorable Vice President was referring about the 3 Bs and 4 Cs. Finally, the caste, which is also playing a vital role, the community is also playing a vital role. Divisive politics are also being increased. But India being supposed to be the world's most democratic country, we have seen most younger generation may not be aware about the politics of the olden days. Prior to 1980, there were only few national parties in the country. They had some national outlook. Finally, they had some ideology. They had some performance. And it was ideological fights or performance. But later on, after globalization come into picture, not only the corporate sectors have entered into politics. Earlier used to say it was only industries versus politician and nexus. Now of late, now it is industry, politicians, corporate, media, nexus, which has come up. So after 1980, regional parties have also come up on the regional aspirations. Some caste-based politics have come up. Finally, all these regional parties, their interest is neither the state, nor the region, nor the nation. It is only a family-interested parties. I don't mind saying that almost all the regional parties in the country, they have become a family-owned parties. They work for the interest of their only families, not for the region, not for the country. So, after the emergence of the regional parties, the expenditure in the political arena has increased like anything. Not only buying votes during elections, even for having a show, even for having a meeting, parties started spending crores of rupees. So, with these issues in mind, but we have also seen India supposed being a most vibrant democratic country with poverty, illiteracy. We have seen emergency days, but people have voted a party which was having a money, muscle, or out of power. The mandate was unilateral. They have thrown out of the power. And we have seen even the recent 2019 elections, even states like Uttar Pradesh, where caste-based parties are there, communal-based parties are there. Irrespective of such regional parties, people have voted to power the performance and the welfare activities. You can imagine people voting and getting elected 64 MPs out of 72. And MLAs getting more than 300 for a single party, though the state had regional parties based on caste and religion. We have people of such this thing in country in the politics, but unfortunately, this money roll day by day, that making elections, buying votes, and we have seen Krishnamurti Garu, Sheshan Garu, how election commissions have become proactive, made at least some changes in the electioneering. And we have seen committees like Goswami Committee to Venkaiah Committee. There were many proposals, there were many recommendations, but unfortunately nothing has come out. Our friend even Vishweshwar Reddy Garu referring about the state funding of election. Somehow, I don't totally agree with the state, and it may minimize, but it may be not the solution. Because buying of votes, you cannot restrict by state funding. I strongly believe and advocate also.
So may I request you another minute or so?
Yeah, I'll conclude this. This presidential form of government, presidential form of system, which Damasha system, proportional voting, going for election, will be one of the major solution for this money power in politics. This was also advocated, I think, a decade back, but somehow all the parties have not come to consensus, which has left. I at least now request and suggest JP Garu to take up this issue of presidential form of election system. And even in the morning, our Honorable Vice President was referring about the simultaneous poll, because I have been seeing in the state, after formation of the state for 6 years, we see every year an election, either regular election, if not, they go for by-election. So election code, no development, and finally, politicians have to spend money, parties have to spend money in the name of elections. So even this simultaneous electioneering and this presidential form of electioneering system, these two issues, I think, through these deliberations, at least a consensus may be brought among the parties, I feel so. With these, my recommendations, suggestions, I conclude. I thank the organizers for giving this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I am conscious that we started late, but I do hope I can go up to 1 o'clock. Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan, you agree with that? Now, I request our good friend, I know him for a number of years from Delhi, Mr. Bhaskar Rao, who will bring a research perspective to the subject under discussion.
Thank you. I'm glad that I could make to this meet. I have a problem. Yeah. Thank you. My concern with the very concept of politics, elections, started several decades ago. As a matter of fact, my first book in 1966 was Politics of Leadership in India, was based on, in response to Slug Harrison. Any of you heard? Slug Harrison was a New York Times correspondent in New Delhi in 1962 to 64. He wrote a book, Most Dangerous Decades of India. It's a case study of Uttar Pradesh and Andhra Pradesh. When I read that book, I found how woolly, how little he understood India's democracy, its roots. In the morning, the Vice President and earlier the presentations have referred to certain basic roots of this country, how the democracy was nurtured. In fact, in that 1966 book, I referred to a model where how the district boards elections were conducted in Andhra Pradesh and how they strengthened the very concept of representativeness of elections. Basically, fundamentally, what we need to look at is the representative character, not from an expenditure point of view or the way we are looking at it. So that book presented how different district levels, people, leaders, representatives of people emerged and how they were able to get elected. The methodology was what that book referred to it. Since then, I have been practically every election, we have been tracking, analyzing in different ways, each time experimenting with different new methodologies. But come back to the point, the first and second nationwide studies that what percentage of voters are paid money, done in practically every part of the country, every state of the country, more than, again, 2 decades ago, and repeated thereafter. I come to some conclusions. I am not going to use any figures here, but money power in politics cannot be addressed without questioning the very scope and structure of campaigning and a representative character of people, which we tend to not take into account. The linkage is larger and not poll limited. We tend to look at everything from election point of view. Many of us thought a few decades ago that the empirical evidence could make the difference. That is, knowing more has not made any difference. As all of you know, last 3 elections, we have more information about the candidates, about the expenditure, about, say, everything, practically every aspect of it. And yet, has that made any difference? No, not so ever, in no way. So we have recently come up with a new idea, that is trajectory, that is the development, the democracy, and the governance. We need to take the 3 together. Only then, perhaps, we could see some light through. Is what, I'm not going into the details of that, but you can see some of my recent books on this aspect, including the one just recently released. So, the acceptability of political parties, we tend to look at it, acceptability of political parties as the way to look at the solution. I think that's where perhaps we need to relook at that idea. The very finance model is what needs to be addressed as a priority. The model itself is at fault. That's why I mentioned about the 1966. The models that we have, like several examples in this country, individuals mostly. In fact, Balwantrai Mehta Committee in 1957 have suggested that the local, up to the Jilla Parishad level, the election should be a non-political basis. And in fact, many states have gone for it in the late 70s, 1970s. The corruption in India has gone beyond only when the elections have the non-political label was removed towards the end of 1970s. So, in fact, I was the other day in another meeting where I was a part of an election in several decades ago. Goparaj Ramchandra Rao, his short name is Gora. He was one of the advocates with Mahatma Gandhi that the elections in India should be a non-political party basis. Whether it is possible or not, I am not going to that. That's not my point here. Now, to sum up, without going into all those models, that we have several models, people who have been elected, Vavilal Gopalakrishna, some of you may be knowing in Andhra, is one example of that. Gautam Lachanna is another example. I mean, very well-known people who are at the district level. So, summing up all that, I would like to come up with 7 specific suggestions which many of you will not agree.
No political party will agree in any case. If that is the consideration, then there is no need for me to continue this. I go and sit there. If we go by what political parties will like or not like, we'll never be able to go out of it. I would like to see this made to be a landmark, a turning point in the political representative character and the democracy and the trajectory part, the development, the democracy and the governance aspect. All the three need to be. So the first and foremost thing is the invisible factor, what I call the invisible factor. The origins of the quid pro phenomena that has crept into our public affairs at all levels, in all the three respects, the democracy, the development and the governance. What is that? Corporate funding. If you can't really address this, if you can't take a blunt decision about this, what I say is crowdfunding is what we need to look at. Crowdfunding is what we need to go back. Not in addition to corporate funding, in lieu of corporate funding. Corporate funding should totally be out of contest. I know we have been talking about the United States Supreme Court decision about their constitutional, but that of course is altogether different. One of the fallacies that we have gone into is trying to imitate somebody else's model, forgetting our own models that we have in this country. So my first proposal is crowdfunding, no corporate funding whatsoever. The linkage starts there. My second consideration for this meet is, again, none of you will agree it's possible. That is, source of many of our problems, source of hatred in public affairs, between political parties, between political leaders, is this. You can't even sit together to discuss an issue. Forget about the solution part. Beg your pardon? Oh, sorry. Yeah. So my second suggestion is campaign should be together as much as possible. We the candidates should go before the voters, not I the candidate. We tend to go each one on his own, each candidate go to voters separately, so that he could talk about the other one more than himself or what he or she would like to do or stands for or what. So this is very possible, and we have models in this country. As I mentioned long ago, we have forgotten about it, we've given up that. We need to reconsider that campaign together. That is, we the candidates should go to before the voters. At least, if not every meeting, there has to be certain, in every assembly or every mandal, at every point, all the candidates should together, whether it is assembly or Lok Sabha. The post-poll collaboration, post-poll collaboration is possible only then. Today, we don't have what is the good governance. If you can't work together, you can't expect to have a good governance, as everybody claims that we are giving good governance. How is it possible? If two political parties, two leaders can't come together, the one who won and the one defeated, if they can't come together, how do you expect a system to be evolved of our own? We have fallen into the fallacies of some others' models. So we never think of it or consider, we are not even considered this option. So this cooperative model of candidates campaigning together, going to them and telling them what they want, it's easy for the voters also to decide whom they would like to, and they cut short all the 3 C's that we were talking in the morning, the Vice President was talking. The third point, yes, I'm coming to. The third point is all news sources, this is what Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan has repeatedly been talking, and I have been talking to, all news channels as an obligation give free time to all candidates. Why Doordarshan or AIR alone should do that, and what they are doing, how they are doing is a different matter. I'm not going to that now. But the fact is, the Supreme Court has said long, long ago, all airwaves belong to public. Similarly, all media, public media, I'm talking about, belongs to the public. So they all should give free time to all candidates, election time. You know, the formula need to be evolved. I'll cut short my point. The fourth point is nomination of candidates by the parties. The B form which the parties give should only be accepted if the parties are following their own constitution. If they are not following their own constitution of electing their own office bearers or whatever that they have mentioned in their constitution, why should they be eligible to nominate a candidate? I wonder. Think about it. As a part of that, the sixth point is, no nomination of candidates should be without validation or rather ratification by a certain number of voters. Now the number is very small, 50 people nomination. That's too small, and that need to be spread, and that 50 need to be local of that constituency, which is not the case at the moment. Then the fifth point is, let the campaign limit to candidates or parties' manifesto and its proposals. We have done an analysis of campaign speeches, both in various areas. We found that 60 to 70% of what they talk is about the other candidate, not themselves or their programs or their proposals. So this needs to be reversed. So that is the sixth point. The last point, the seventh, is the social audit idea need to be brought back into, and the two acts, we have two acts, many states, the RTI, Right to Information Act, and the second one is right to guaranteeing the delivery of public services. Many states, 14, 15 states have adopted this, in fact, some of them more than a decade ago, they've forgotten about it. People have forgotten about it. So these need to be revived to bring back some sense into our campaigning, some sense into our elections, some sense into our representative character, and we need to think beyond the polls. We need to think in terms of development. We need to think in terms of democracy and governance together. Only then we find some way out of this present situation. And I hope to see that this meeting becomes a landmark. Thank you.
I'm sorry that I had to cut short the time, but the idea is that we should have more participation from the audience, and I know you have very more interesting ideas on the subject, but I hope as we sail along we'll find opportunities to express them. So may I now throw open the topic for discussion from the audience, and what I would suggest is please reveal your name and just limit it to the question. We don't want bhashan. Just tell me what exactly is your point, a specific question. I'm sure you can also mention whom you want to reply, because we can certainly request the person concerned to answer the point. May I have about, I think we'll take about 20-25 minutes maximum. We'll take about 6 or 7 questions, okay? Yeah, we'll come to that. Thank you.
Sir, my name is Bhagat Singh. I work in a public sector undertaking, BHEL. My question is to Konda Vishweshwar Reddy, sir. Sir, you know, you have been publicized as the richest contestant in the whole India. So we just heard how the money power has affected JP sir or Lakshman sir in one way. So I want to know, being rich has been a disadvantage to you, because being rich, you will be under microscope for poll expenditure or election expenditure, whatever you then, and the slightest modifications will be shown you under a big microscope, and it will be popularized. So you were under that pressure. Was it difficult to you to maintain the election expenditure? Was it an
Firstly.
advantage or a disadvantage to you
Okay,
being rich?
firstly, let me correct.
Yes.
I'm the richest declared candidate.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir, that I understand that. Yes.
Secondly, yes, this was a very big apprehension for me, and I took the help of researchers and also feedback from public. I had the very same apprehension. Ye paisa wala aaya, he is not from us, our clan and society. He is far removed from reality and no one will vote. Strangely, very strangely, it was a significant advantage to me being rich. ये पैसा वाला है, इसको पैसे बनाने का जरूरत नहीं है. He is rich and he doesn't need to be corrupt. And actually, it did help me in the first election and in this election. So sometimes being rich is an advantage, especially in the current Indian context. Maybe in the olden days, I think a rich was far removed from the ground reality, and therefore people don't tend to vote. But today's today's Indian voters are aware of the corruption, and generally rich declared candidates generally tend not to be corrupt.
Thank you, sir. My question to all the panelists is, there is a national party which is looking for a new state president in Telangana state. There is a media buzz that the person, deserving person which they are looking for is a person who can financially sponsor the complete election campaign for the forthcoming municipal election. Is this not a money power in politics? Thank you.
I thought, in fact, I was just reading a message on WhatsApp before I came in here. And I think people are jaded. Once again, I have to quote this research. And I think even Mr. Vaishnav mentioned in this speech earlier, yes, there's an effect on money in buying votes, but it varies significantly. And in some places, I mean, in my constituency, the furthermost and the poorest is Tandur. The effect of money and vote buying is close to 27%. When we come to this constituency, it's only about 9 or 10%. Now, spending in municipal elections, usually even parties which do spend money in general elections tend to spend less money in municipal elections, because in municipal elections, you know your neighbors. Every councillor has only 1,400 votes. So all the 1,400 voters literally know you because you live in that colony. So the effect of money, fortunately, in municipal elections is less, but it is there. It is up to 10 to 20%, but it is enough to win or lose elections. And I think currently I can confidently say that most of the parties, except probably some ruling parties, are totally bankrupt and they don't have any money.
I would like to make it very clear. We have an internal democracy while getting elected right from polling booth to national president. You might have seen, without any family background, persons coming into the political party in BJP. In Andhra Pradesh itself, we have seen more than 12 people becoming presidents. National level, you might have aware, before Amit Shah becoming president, he was not known to general public. He started his political career as a polling booth manager. It is possible only in BJP, except for this caliber and the talent and the service to the party, only can get elected. We have every 3 years election process right from polling booth to national. I started my career as a secretary of an assembly. I could able to become national secretary also. So we don't see in matters like money becoming president. Thank you.
I think we have 2 or 3 people. I suppose we can just limit it to these 3 people. Please go ahead. Make it very short, please.
Yeah, my question is to Lakshmanji, and in your presentation you have said these days these media campaignings are getting increasing, and political parties are spending a lot of money on the media campaigning and technological things. Okay, and being a president of a huge party which is having a huge network of organization, so is there any effect or is there any role of your organization from top to the down? Or do you think that if your party organization people can do in a better way for campaigning, don't you think that this finance and this expenditure may decrease? As a practical, means I want to know from you as a practical experience since you are a president of the party.
Yeah, you're right, because nowadays, even the media, as I said, it incurs expenditure not only at the time of election, even during the normal time. But we have a network right from our polling booth to mandal, district and state level. We'll try to communicate physically and digitally also. Of late, we are using the mode of even social media, which is less compared to normal media. We are trying our best to reach out to the people physically and digitally also.
My name is Anjal Prakash, and my question actually is to Natasha and Milan. I was just doing a very quick gender audit of this 2 days program. I found there are 8 women speakers out of 68 speakers altogether. So about 12% of the total speakers are women, and this is 2% less than the women MPs who were elected in 2019 Lok Sabha. My question actually is that is it not only money but the masculine power in politics which is the main culprit? What's yours?
Yeah, may I? Thank you. I just want to say, given the statistics that you've mentioned, it's now significant that I'm sitting here. And I think the fact that if you go through when I go through my social media feeds across platforms, the one thing that I often see is people in my environment, women in my environment, talking about what are often referred to as manners now, because somehow the men seem to dominate. And it's not just on occasions like this, but a lot more, of course, is what we see when there are, say, government meetings, industry heads being represented from there and all of that. So I think there is now, I must say, a conscious effort to sort of make it more diverse when we talk about gender and to have greater participation. I want to say that there's no dearth of talent, as we know, when it comes to women. Look at our women leaders in the political space. Mr. Reddy, of course, just made the point that you can look at the politicians we've had. This part of India, in particular, of course, seems to have led from the front on this. Look at all the chief ministers that we've had. Even the North, we've even had a prime minister. We've even had a president who's been a woman. So I think there have been massive strides. But yes, you're right. You mentioned the 2019 Lok Sabha. I think it's got a 14% representation of women, which is the highest so far. And at 14%, if we are the highest, you're right, we clearly have a long way to go. But I think steps like this from 8% next year, perhaps we'll be at 20, and then eventually at 50.
I honestly think women have a very unfair advantage in politics. And if you look at it, I mean, honestly, the only problem is less of women come forward to join politics. If you see, the most powerful people in politics are women. Indira Gandhi, Trinamool Congress, Mamata Banerjee, Jayalalitha, and they come in and they rise faster within political parties and political systems. And when very often people don't listen to loud voices and masculine voices. They listen to softer voices more deeply. Thank you.
Basically, I am a finance student. Hello. Yeah. Basically, I am a finance student, and my question is to the representatives of two powerful parties of India. As we are obliged to deliver our audit reports in time, so do you support that finances of your parties should be audited and the report should be publicly put? My second question is, what is your view on timely delivery of service as you put out your manifestos and you say that in such period we will deliver such promises? How do you commit yourself, and what is your view that as JP Narayan sir is advocating since 2 years or more, there should be an act like timely delivery of service both from the politicians or the parties, also from the administrative level, like collectors and the officers, if they don't deliver the service. Both the people I want now.
As far as this social auditing is concerned, we are very transparent. We regularly submit our accounts. Yeah, we regularly submit our accounts not only to the Election Commission, but every year we even submit to the concerned departments. You are at liberty and free. At any time you can just go through these things. And as far as this delivery of service is concerned, it is proved. Because first time when Modi got elected, he has proved, and second time when he got mandate more than the first time, it itself proves that not only the promises made in the manifesto, even the ideological which we are committed since beginning, right from Jan Sangh days, we have started delivering within this year also. We have been seeing right from 370 article to of latest issues, irrespective of the mandate or public concern about that issues.
We have a time limitation. Kindly ask us.
My name is Chengal Reddy. I work for farmers.
Yeah, sorry, 1 minute. My simple answer is yes. Audited reports have to be published, including sources through electoral bonds. Thank you.
I am Chengal Reddy. My question is to Mr. Bhaskara and Mr. Milan. See, if you see the system of political parties, agents, and then people working at various levels throughout their career over the period of time, some sort of a way getting the money spent and then getting the votes done. Is it not due to failure of administration? Because basically a legislature is only to make, once you elect an MLA or MP, is to make legislation, not to go down for opening, every Tom, Dick and Harry, even roads and all that repairs. So this is why I say, is it due to the system, failure of political system, is due to failure of the administrative and judicial system in this country?
That lady, last one.
I'm Poonam Kaur. I'd rather have very simple questions. Ma'am, first to you, the lady. Okay. Yeah, it's just related. I'll quickly finish. What has been figuratively the effect of social media, rather Facebook, in last elections, and what do you expect it to be in the coming elections? Secondly, other than money playing a role in politics, I think through social media there's a lot of fear-mongering which is happening. There's a lot of fear which is induced. And I think a lot happens with collective consciousness. So if social media plays a role that they reduce the posts of fear, like right now we are talking about the war and Iran and everything, and we increase the positive posts, I think that will change a lot in the mindset of people, because at the end of the day, with money, power or masculine power or any kind of power, we are just trying to buy the mind space of people. So what do you have to say about this? Thank you.
Excuse me, can I ask a related question to relate to that social media? No, related question, sir. Now, through
Thank you, and thank you for the question. Two separate questions. One, how do we see elections on social media? The fact that we have someone like me now looking at elections, and I am just one of the hundreds of people who work on elections. Like the introduction to me said, we have 40 plus teams that just worked on the national election in India. Shows that there is a lot of political discourse and a lot of political activity on social media. There's absolutely no denying that. Was your question, how do you see it going forward? So Got it. So I'll tell you how we see it. We see it it's two ways. One, it is our responsibility and our role to allow elected officials and those seeking office, etc., to use social media in a constructive fashion to reach out to their constituents with their message that they want to reach out with, including sort of use all our tools like political advertising, etc. And at the same time, we want to make sure that the platform is a safe place where people can engage in political discourse. there can be healthy debate around key issues that matter, healthcare, education, you name it. Whatever matters to you, you should be able to engage in this. So this is pretty much our focus. And to do this, again, to step back, we've got to make sure it's, like I said, an authentic place. There's no bad activity, as we call it, no interference from actors who are based overseas or within the country, that the platform is sort of conducive to the political discourse. There's no misinformation as far as we can help it. There's no hate speech. And that sort of leads me to the second part of your question. Well, Facebook has to be, and we are completely clear about it, a safe and authentic place. There is no room for hate speech or misinformation on the platform, right? We have very strong community guidelines on cracking down on hate speech. If there is a hate speech violation, it is a community standards violation, that piece of content will come down. Having said that, we do acknowledge that our work in this is never done, that it is an enormous challenge, and but we are committed to taking this head on, which is why our partnerships, our investments in technology and people, all that we are doing with community members, with society at large, holding all these round tables, hearing what you want us to do, where can we improve, hold us more accountable. We want that, because at the end of the day, like I said, we believe in voice and expression, and we want to create that authentic space for people to come out and say what they want. Yeah.
We have about 7 minutes. I'll take only 5 minutes, but I'll request Mr. Vaishnav, he has got something to say because he has not reacted to the audience's question.
Hello. I just have the last question here.
I just wanted to comment on your point. I think you're exactly right. I mean, I think both case studies and actually surveys of MLAs and MPs show that very few of either view legislation as either a primary task or an important task. In fact, both they and their constituents define their role as intervening in the administration of public service goods and services. And that does create a problem. And in fact, I think the proliferation of these constituency development funds like MP Lads and MLA Lads unfortunately just further deepens that. And the irony is that for many MPs and MLAs, they don't actually like these schemes because they're not big enough to be able to spread the money around. So you end up creating more enemies in your own constituency than necessary. So I think that certainly does compound the problem. I just wanted to say something about the gender point. I can only speak to this when it comes to matters of criminality, but the data there is pretty unambiguous that of the MLAs and MPs with declared cases that cross the threshold of being a serious case, which would warrant real jail time if a conviction were obtained, 90% of those cases are with men. So on that metric alone, I would certainly welcome more women in the Indian political system.
First of all, let me thank all my fellow panelists. They cooperated so very well that we are able to stick to the time schedule. I'm very sorry to the person who wanted to ask a related question. I will be, or any other panelist member will be happy to answer your question immediately after the end of the session. I'm sorry to have been a little blunt on that, but I think somewhere we have to apply a limit. 1 o'clock is the time given, and we'll have the lunch at 1 o'clock. But we will always be available for any clarification, even beyond that. One or two issues I thought I should mention. I think Nani Palkiwala said, India is a rich country which managed to keep its people poor. This is what has happened in the last 70 years. It's a country of tremendous resources and opportunities, and still we are going slow in our growth path. The way in which democracy has advanced in the last few years, there are many bright features, but unfortunately, money has been destroying the quality of democracy in this country. I entirely agree with Mr. Reddy Garu when he said the limits to expenditure, etc. It is meaningless, it is a sham if we cannot implement it. At least I personally feel the limits can be removed if we can improve our other reform measures quickly. And there are 2 or 3 important reform measures which can certainly be considered immediately. the first past post system with about which the presentation was mentioned, that needs to be addressed immediately. The second point is about funding of the political elections. I do agree state funding. In fact, when I was in the election commission, I opposed state funding. But having seen the various things that have been happening in the electoral scene in the country, I have a small suggestion. I know it has been put forth on many occasions. It is not state funding, it is public funding. Now, corporates are giving money, and they are in fact confused when they give money because they do not know which party will come to power. So sometimes they have to pamper the ruling party as well as the opposition party. So one of the things I have suggested is if you can have a national election fund, let the public be allowed. Of course, the companies are exempt from giving donations to political parties, but the individuals, they can also be allowed 100% tax exemption. We should build a corpus over a period of time so that the entire expenditure is met out of that and not from the corporates or from the government budget. Public funding of the elections. I know it is not going to be easy. There are limitations, problems, but I am sure people like Mr. Bhaskar Rao can certainly bring a scheme how it can be implemented to the satisfaction of all the political parties after having a dialogue with all the political parties. There are one or two other things I thought I should mention. The source of money to the political parties, that needs to be regulated, not so much the expenditure part of it. The money comes now legally as well as now through other methods by cash contributions, etc. Unfortunately, in the last 1 or 2 years, we have these bearer bonds. I'm very sorry to say, though it was claimed to promote transparency, it does not. It is opaque. It has a lot of problems. In fact, this is going to increase the expenditure, election expenditure, and a lot of corporates are going to be under pressure. Because previously, at least only profit-making companies were expected to give donations, whereas now, even loss-making companies can give donations through the bearer bond scheme. And the bearer bonds also allows foreign money to come in an indirect form. So I would urge the government to seriously consider whether the bearer bond scheme can be improved upon or at least totally abolished. That is certainly going to increase the quality of the money, role of money in the elections, and it is better that we get rid of it. Then we have money coming from internal sources, external sources, as well as the party members. In Canada, for example, there is a limitation of money that can be given by individual party members and their family members. Whether we can think of some kind of a limitation for individual contribution to political parties. But all said and done, there is no answer to cash contributions to political parties. And if political parties are going to accept it, I can narrate an instance when Mr. Ram Jethmalani came and met me when he was about to contest elections against Mr. Vajpayee. And there he said, what if people, not my friends, but some others come and spend money? Can you catch them? But there are limitations and loopholes in law, and cash contribution is, again, a very dangerous source of income for political parties. I don't know how to tackle it. Mr. Reddy was mentioning the enforcement agencies have to do, and the other gentleman mentioned about the role of administration. I agree. the discussions like this group will throw some new suggestions and see that we are able to attract good young people. Because I think, although this again I had expressed this view in Visakhapatnam in one of my lectures, there should be an age limit for politicians. It was criticized by